Go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls. I'm Rachel, 27, and that sentence, served under chandeliers at Seattle's priciest restaurant, landed harder than the $3,270 check they slid in front of me. My sister Victoria laughed. My parents smirked. My brother filmed dessert. I was the charity case told to pay for the privilege of being humiliated. I swallowed it, again, until one person at the far end finally stood. Grandma Dorothy. The woman who actually showed up for me. The room froze. She'd been watching for 22 years. And tonight, she wasn't just going to speak. She was going to flip the table. Because what they didn't know was this. There were receipts, a new will, and a missing $750,000 that would make family mean accountability. Have you ever been told to be grateful while being used? Comment your story, and tell me what family means to you. Belmont smelled like truffle butter and money, the kind that sticks to your skin. I stood there with a clutch that suddenly felt like a brick while Victoria's joke echoed off Crystal. My father didn't even look up when he said, "Sit down, Rachel. You're making a scene." I sat. That's what I'd learned to do. Fold myself small enough to fit the role they wrote for me. Conversation flowed around me like I was a coat on the back of a chair. Victoria purred about a new Mercedes. Kenneth recited numbers from his promotion like scripture. My parents leaned in, radiant with pride. When I said as lightly as I could that I'd just landed a $50,000 contract, my mother sliced the moment clean. "That's nice, dear. Kenneth, tell us more about your bonus." I smiled because that's what keeps the machine running. 22 years of reminders. I was 5 when they adopted me, old enough to remember my life before, and apparently old enough to earn the after. Victoria got the big bedroom, private schools, just because trips. I got hand-me-downs and lectures on gratitude. At 32, she'd perfected the art of pressing my bruises in public and calling it teasing. The waiter placed the leather folder in front of me like a summons. I opened it. $3,270. Premium steaks, lobster tails, a wine list that read like a trust fund. Kenneth had ordered 3 desserts just because he could. My hands shook. "What's this?" I managed. Victoria's smile was sugared poison. "Oh, didn't we mention? You're paying tonight. Consider it your contribution since you're always taking and never giving." My mother ticked off charity like line items. "Roof, food, clothes, we gave you everything." I wanted to say $750,000, but that number wasn't in my mouth yet. What I had was a card with a fragile limit, a savings account meant for rent and software renewals, and a throat full of heat I couldn't swallow. I signed. The pen carved my name into a receipt and into something harder inside me. They planned Tuscany next, all 4 of them, not one glance my way. A laugh floated, bright and careless. I took a sip of water and tasted iron. "Same time next month," my mother chirped, as if humiliation were a subscription. Under the chandeliers, I realized the cold wasn't the air. It was home. The room didn't breathe until Grandma Dorothy stood. "One, just a moment, please," and the table straightened like soldiers. I felt the first hairline crack in the script my family kept handing me. She walked me out under those chandeliers as if she were escorting a survivor from a wreck. Seattle air hit like mercy. In the car, Thomas, her driver for 3 decades, gave me a steady look that said, "You're safe now." I didn't speak until the city lights smeared into the lake. I can't believe I paid $3,070 to be told I'm not family. Dorothy's hand found mine. "You paid for their last performance," she said. The curtain's down. I woke in her guest room to water against the shore and 43 missed calls from Victoria, 27 from my mother, 16 from Kenneth. Rage, bargaining, threats. I put the phone face down and stared at the view that didn't belong to me. "Not yet. Study," Thomas said gently. Dorothy sat behind a mahogany desk. A man in a sharp suit rose. "Walter, attorney." He opened a leather folio and the numbers reorganized my life. Liquid assets, property, stakes, Words I'd only seen on headlines now attached to the woman who'd brought cupcakes to my school plays. Immediate access accounts activate today, Walter said. $5 million while we finalize the trust. I laughed, a small, cracked sound. $5 million for what? I've been stretching $50,000 over 6 months, about $8,333 a month, into rent, software, subcontractors, taxes, and the kind of student loans nobody helped with. Dorothy didn't smile. For breath, she said, so you can stop choosing between dignity and dinner. We spent hours in nouns I'd never owned. Governance, fiduciary duty, advisory board. Dorothy's notes were meticulous. She'd thought of everything, including how they'd try to take it all back. They'll claim undue influence, Walter warned. They can't undo solid evaluations from 3 doctors, but they can drag you through mud. Dorothy's voice sharpened. We don't flinch, we document. Quiet work began. Thomas firmed up security. Walter outlined press protocols. No off-the-cuff interviews. Designate statements. Keep receipts. I forwarded screenshots. Burner threats signed V. I archived every message that started with "We love you" and ended with "You'll regret this." I changed passwords, locked down cloud drives, backed up every client contract I'd ever earned with nights and coffee and a backbone nobody saw. When the house quieted, I sat with spreadsheets, not theirs, mine. Project timelines, retainers, what my hands had built while their mouths stayed busy. I traced margins with a fingertip, remembering the small, stubborn math of surviving. One more mock-up, one more delayed payment, one more week of saying, I'm fine. The old reflex to prove myself twitched. I wanted to email evidence to the world. Walter had told me not to feed fires. Dorothy came to the doorway, smaller in the light but steady. You've always been doing the real work, she said. Now you do it with protection. I nodded, and the nod felt like a hinge turning. The machine that ran on my silence was seizing. I could hear it in the space between 2 waves. Dorothy tapped a folder on the desk like a quiet gavel. There's something else, she said, and the floor under me tilted. Inside, bank statements, transfers, a trust I'd never known I had. When Patricia and Gregory adopted you, they received $750,000 from your birth parents' trust for your care and education. My breath snagged. The statements told the rest. Luxury vacations, a private school wire labeled Victoria's tuition, a dealership payment the year Kenneth turned 16. Line after line that spelled out meant for Rachel and spent on everyone else. They stole it, I whispered. Dorothy didn't soften the word. Yes. Something cramped in my chest. 22 years of be grateful colliding with numbers in black and white. The part of me that still waited for a fair version of my mother and father went quiet. I looked up, and Dorothy's eyes were steady as winter water. We've filed civil action, she said. With interest, they owe you about $2.3 million. My phone buzzed again and again until the table hummed. You're selfish. We'll fix this. She's confused. Then Gregory's name lit the screen. Walter nodded. Speaker. I pressed. Rachel, my father said, voice stretched thin. Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly. We need to talk. I stared at the folder. We are talking, I said. About the $750,000 you took. Silence. Then Patricia lunged into the gap. That money was for raising you. Housing, food, utilities. Hand-me-downs and student loans aren't $750,000, I said. Victoria got designer labels. Kenneth got a car. I got to pay for community college by working nights. Dorothy's voice cut through, iron calm. Come explain your math to a judge. The line went dead. By afternoon, the story leaked. Headlines multiplied like wasps. Billionaire disinherits family for adopted granddaughter. News vans lined the curb. Anonymous accounts called me a gold digger, a con, a liar who'd groomed an old woman. A reporter purred into my voicemail about allegations that Dorothy had funded my startup years ago. I opened my spreadsheets like shields, loans, invoices, repayments, but pixels can't stop a mob. The house lights felt too bright. The windows felt like eyes. That evening, Dorothy's hand trembled in mine for the first time. "I need you to hear this," she said. "I'm sick." The words fell softly, heavier than anything we'd signed. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Maybe 6 months. The room shrank. I'd lost things before. Nothing had prepared me for the idea of losing the only person who ever stayed. "Why now?" I asked, but I knew. "Because I've watched you suffer long enough," she said. "And because there's still time to put things right." I slept in pieces, jolting awake to burner texts signed V. "I know where you live. This isn't over." I forwarded them to Walter, who answered at once. Documented. Security increased. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, rage waited. Fear tried to braid itself into both. In the morning, Walter stood in the study doorway with bad news dressed as strategy. "They're filing will contests. Undue influence, diminished capacity," he said. "Victoria also hired a PI and is pushing a smear about forged contracts." Dorothy didn't flinch. She looked smaller, somehow brighter. "Then we move first," she said. "Press conference. Full truth. Documents, evaluations, everything. Rachel speaks." "I can't," I said, throat tight. "I'll say it wrong." Dorothy's gaze held me in place like a hand between my shoulder blades. "Say it true," she said. "That's never been wrong." Thomas nodded from the doorway. Walter slid a draft statement across the desk. The plan sat there, stark and necessary. Daylight. I closed my eyes and saw the Belmont's bill total, $3,270, floating over my signature like a dare. I opened them and saw the folder, $750,000, like a verdict. Dorothy squeezed my fingers. "Tomorrow," she said. "We stop letting them define you." The house exhaled with me. Dawn edged the lake, thin and salt silver. For the first time, the cold inside me wasn't home. It was weather. And weather changes. Press badges flashed like fish scales under studio lights. Walter sat to my left, Dorothy to my right, small in her chair but unbreakable. Cameras clicked. "Thank you for coming," Dorothy began, voice steady. She laid it out like an audit of a soul. Medical evaluations from 3 doctors, the notarized new will, bank records tracing the $750,000 meant for me into Victoria's tuition, Kenneth's car, vacations I never took, names, dates, signatures, receipts. When Dorothy finished, she turned to me. "Rachel would like to say a few words." Every lens swiveled. I gripped the edge of the table. "I didn't ask for any of this," I said. "I wanted a family. Instead, I was told to be grateful while I paid $3,270 to be humiliated. I found out yesterday that money meant for my care was spent on everyone but me. I'm not here to be cruel back. I'm here to stop it." The doors burst open. Victoria stumbled in, mascara streaked, anger bright. "Lies!" she shouted, lunging toward the table. Security moved. Microphones floated like gnats. A reporter fired. "Ms. Victoria, did your parents receive $750,000 for Rachel's care?" She snapped without thinking. "We earned that money raising her." The room inhaled. Walter didn't blink. "Thank you," he said softly, as if she'd handed us a signed confession. The clip went viral before we reached the elevator. They pivoted to law. The courthouse smelled like paper and rain. Dorothy, finally in a wheelchair, spine still straight, squeezed my hand. Across the aisle, Patricia wore a sympathetic cardigan and a PR firm. Gregory looked hollow. Kenneth studied the table. Victoria glared like heat. Judge Morrison entered, The gavel's crack cutting the room clean. The family's lawyer launched into undue influence, diminished capacity, and gold digger. Walter stood with a stack of facts and the patience of Tide. Medical letters. Corporate minutes showing Dorothy closing deals last week. Screenshots of threats signed V. Recordings. The viral video. Then the documents that had sat like a stone in my chest. The adoption trust transfers. Line items that turned roof and food into misappropriation. This is not undue influence, Walter said. This is a victim finally protected. The judge leaned forward. I've read enough to see a pattern. Exclusion, financial exploitation, and coercive humiliation. Patricia started to stand. Your Honor, with respect. Sit, Judge Morrison said, steel and silk. She turned to Dorothy's papers. Ms. Hayes was of sound mind. The will is valid. She faced my parents. Restitution for the misused trust, $750,000 plus interest, approximately $2.3 million, payable in 90 days. Her gaze cut to Victoria. Further outbursts and I will hold you in contempt. Victoria swore. Bailiffs moved. The gavel came down. Contest dismissed with prejudice. Outside, microphones lunged. What will you do with billions? Someone shouted. I looked at Dorothy. She looked at the sky. We build, I said. We repair what they broke. The answer surprised me by sounding like a plan I already had. Lawyers retained for kids like me, emergency housing, therapy stipends, scholarships with no strings. That night, the house was quiet except for lake water. News shows replayed Victoria's meltdown in loops between legal analysts, explaining why we'd won in under a minute. A burner text arrived. I know where you live. This isn't over. V. Walter filed restraining orders. Thomas doubled security. I wasn't shaking. The fear that used to live in my bones had somewhere else to go now. Into action. Dorothy slept. I stood at the window and realized this was the first day I hadn't apologized for existing. The machine that ran on my silence was finally out of gas. Dorothy faded over 3 weeks. Sunlight on the quilt, lake light on her face, my hand in hers. I can die happy now, she whispered. I told her not to say it. She smiled anyway, the kind that makes a promise stick. On a Tuesday morning, with the room bright and quiet, she thanked me for being my real family. And then she was gone. The funeral was small. Me, Thomas, Walter, a few friends who'd earned the word. No cameras, no speeches, just gratitude and breath. Grief came in clean waves, and when it receded, it left purpose. I signed papers with hands that didn't tremble. We stood up the Dorothy Hayes Foundation, legal aid, emergency housing, counseling, scholarships, for adopted kids trapped in the dark places I knew by heart. Thomas became operations director. I hired a management team for her companies and took a front row seat to learn. Governance, risk, impact. I asked questions until midnight and again at dawn. Consequences arrived for the people who taught me what family is not. My parents were ordered to repay approximately $2.3 million. The house and cars went first, then the good silver. Criminal charges followed. Kenneth paid back his share and watched his marriage crack. Victoria's viral self-destruction salted the earth. Divorce, failed ventures, debts, a PI suing her for unpaid fees. Emails arrived asking for coffee, forgiveness, money. I answered once. I'd donate $750,000, the amount stolen, in their names to help kids escape what I did. Then I blocked the numbers. A year later, a magazine called me a CEO. I kept the page for Dorothy. The headline wasn't about inheritance. It was about building. In our lobby, photos of kids who got out line the walls like windows to brighter rooms. This is the only legacy that matters. If you're where I was, told to be grateful while you're being used, hear me. Family is proven, not pronounced. Choose the people who show up. Build what they said you couldn't. That's not revenge. That's repair. If this story hit something true, share it to reach someone who needs it. And comment what family means to you.